hopefully to give you some more tools to improve your life, get a better job, work the hours you want, not have a horrible, soul-sucking, humiliating, boring job like far too many of us have, and I've certainly had in the past. So today I thought I'd be uplifting and try to uplift everybody with a story, an area quite popular in the press at the moment, the British cycling team. Nice positive story for me to, a nice little bandwagon for me to jump on. Main story about it being, in 2003, the British Olympic team hired as their coach for the forthcoming Olympics a bloke called Dave Brailsford. Dave Brailsford. Before they hired Dave Brailsford as the chief Olympic coach for the cycling team, after bear in mind, this is before the days of Bradley Wiggins and Chris Froome, that nobody from Britain had ever won the Tour de France. I think they might have picked up like one gold medal at the Olympics 100 years before. I hear stories on the internet that quite successful and famous cycle manufacturers actually refused to sell bikes to the British team because they were frightened that people would see them using them and it would kill their sales, basically. They weren't very popular. They weren't very in demand. But Dave Brailsford had a very strong commitment to what he called the aggregation of marginal gains, which means that he broke everything down, everything the team did, what underpants they wore, where they slept, how they slept, all the kit, everything they did in their tasks to go out cycling, into single tasks, and then looked for like 1% improvements, which means tiny things like wearing indoor kit rather than outdoor kit because I'd lower drag, having heated underpants to keep their whatever needed to be warm kept warm, testing out different types of massage oil and gel to see which one had the fastest recovery, getting a doctor in to tell them how to not get a cold, all these sorts of things, just tiny little things. Each one as of itself was pretty much unnoticeable. You wouldn't actually tell the difference. Anyway, 5 years later, after probably hundreds and hundreds of these tiny little changes, the 2008 Beijing Olympics arrived. Apparently the British team picked up 60% of all the gold medals that were available in cycling. They did even better at the 2012 London Olympics. I think it's up to 2 years ago. I should look this up before I came on. There are 5 between Chris Froome and Bradley Wiggins. There are 5 Tour de France wins in a row, which is generally regarded as the most successful run of Tour de France wins ever, bearing in mind that they couldn't even get the manufacturers to sell them kit before. This is the aggregation or the build-up of tiny gains over time. It's small improvements, each one of which is fairly unnoticeable. So, aggregation of tiny gains, what do I mean by what are these tiny gains? Tiny habits, tiny changes, tiny improvements in habit. As they say, habit equals destiny. What was I going to say? So how do we improve our habits, and why should we? What's important? Why would that be important? Well, the first thing to say about habits is by far the hardest part about changing any habit is just getting started in changing it. If we sort of know, everybody knows what they need to be doing, we tend to just not be doing it. So if you just get started, just start immediately and don't deviate and don't let yourself think about it, because if I want to start something new, what generally happens is my fight and flight response comes up and tells me that I'm going to do something that's scary or that's outside of my comfort zone. That's going to, I'm in danger of losing or failing. That's going to take over my thoughts, take over my imagination, and pretty soon I'm going to be well into the cycle of procrastination and not doing it. Don't think about it. You know what you can do. Just go out and start. Just say, I'm going to do 2 minutes, 10 minutes max, and I'll stop. To see if you can get yourself in the flow and start doing it. The next thing I would say is be far more concerned about the trajectory you're on in life rather than big wins. Just see where over the long term, on a larger picture, see if you can pull back a little bit and take a longer look of where you're going. Are you earning a little bit more, earning a little bit less? You're getting slightly better at your job or slightly worse at your job? This sort of thing. We all want big, sudden success, but that doesn't typically would get us what we want in life. It's a sad fact that typically things arrive at a pace, things happen at a pace far slower than we're actually comfortable or happy with. It's just slightly discomforting. Well, that's why patience, I suppose, and surrender are such important skills. Things just tend to take a little bit longer. These sudden wins, even if you have a sudden win to turn anything into it, it tends to take lots of little wins and hard work thereafter. If you want to know where you're going to be in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, 20 years' time, let alone next year, most efficient, most accurate way of doing it is to look at how do you describe it? At the daily curve of tiny wins, tiny gains, and tiny losses, and see how your daily choices are compounding as they do over time. They surely do, and where that will result you being in 20 years, or 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, because it is the compounding of effect of all these little tiny things, each one of which are typically unnoticeable, that are going to tell us really who we are going to be and where we're going to be in life, or I'd say most important, who we are in the future. It's basically things like, are you eating junk food? Are you watching Netflix? Are you going to the gym? Are you going out meeting new people? Are you reading books? Are you seeking out sources of information from the fringe, which is going to put on the fringes tends to be where the future arrives first. You're likely to be able to learn and improve yourself the most quickly. What I also say about habits is when we first try something, we don't tend to enjoy it. As Epictetus once said, shut up. Nothing is of itself either pleasurable or unpleasurable, but habit makes it so. And I think by far the most important habit is the habit of focus, the habit of learning to be able to give our attention onto one thing, which in itself is in turn is probably based on the habit of being able to exclude or ignore distractions, because we are all very, very easily distracted, as all advertisers and politicians well know. That sounds like a topic for the next little Facebook Live. By the way, I do time myself as well. I've got these little clocks to make sure I don't procrastinate too much. Did any of this make any sense? Sound useful? Does it sound like some nitty-gritty that you can actually put into your life, some actual practical tools that you can actually use right now? If so, give us a comment. If you think something was missing, tell me about that as well. And I'll see you in a couple of days on the next Facebook Live. It's very much. Shane.